Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in.
All right, good morning. My name is Jeff Warrock here at the National Weather Service in Wakefield. Everyone should be able to see my screen and hear me okay. We're going to be kind of talking about the weather, obviously focusing on the tropics and what we're expecting here over the next few days. There on the image there, I went in and pulled the satellite image in so you can actually go ahead and see what's really going on out there in the tropics. I make it, well, didn't really make it any bigger, but I just made it full screen. So obviously Humberto, major hurricane, 155 mile per hour winds, out in the Atlantic, continue to forecast track, towards the northwest. We'll talk about that here pretty soon. And over here, tropical depression number 9. I mean, you got some organization, you got some spin there. Using the IR, the infrared imagery to kind of show maybe some of the deeper showers and storms and some of the convection. And obviously, you don't really see the thunderstorms really kind of getting themselves organized as of yet. They are expecting the system to become a tropical storm here before too long, just not as good an organization as what we see here with Humberto. So we'll get kind of right into it and talk about what's going to be going on the next few days. This is the track of Hurricane Humberto. Forecast to continue to be a major hurricane really for quite some time, all the way really through about Tuesday as it goes kind of west and northwest of Bermuda here. Still going to be a major hurricane. It's going to be a bit of a player in our weather, and we'll talk about why that is, even though it's so far offshore, and eventually starts to weaken as it makes that turn and stays off the coast. The models really are in really good agreement. And think if you look at the western edge here, where the hurricane might track, like how close could the center get, that's actually doing a pretty good job. The western extent of some of the models, are kind of in this area here on the west side of the air track here. But a lot of the consensus that this thing's going to curve pretty quickly here in time. So that's good news. Humberto stays off the coast. It is a major hurricane. It's going to have a pretty good sized wind field with it because it is such a big storm, but it is staying pretty far out to sea, even though it will still impact our weather, especially on the marine side, and even cause some issues with tides that we'll talk about. Looking at Tropical Depression 9, I tell you, this has a lot of great confidence too. So, as much as we were trying to dial this in last week, yesterday, there was a lot of consensus starting to lean towards a very, very, very sharp turn like this. So instead of coming up here off the Carolinas, it does look like it's going to strengthen into a tropical storm. Eventually, maybe become a hurricane. There is, a lot of the guidance is starting to say, strong tropical storm, potentially, low end hurricane. So, they went ahead the Hurricane Center, and they do have this thing becoming a hurricane there on Tuesday. And again, that's kind of a pretty good consensus in the guidance. And then there's this sharp turn that takes it out to sea, and I'll just show you the model guidance so you can see it for that one. There's a lot of consensus that takes this thing basically off of Daytona and makes us hard right. So that's really good news for us. There's very few models that bring this thing anywhere further north, than say Jacksonville, North Florida. So that's good news for us. It's going to stay way to the south. It's going to stay a little bit further offshore. So that is going to mean better weather for us. So we'll kind of get through that. But again, good confidence in that. So I wanted to really show that we're not really talking about this thing coming up off the South Carolina coast and stalling much anymore. It's just going to head on out to sea. So that'll be good news. All right. So this is what's going on in the weather maps in the bigger picture. And really what you want to focus on is here, from Tuesday on. So when you look at Tuesday, you have, what's going to be Tropical Storm Imelda out here, and you have Hurricane Humberto way offshore. But then you see this really strong front that's coming down through New York and Pennsylvania. And that thing's going to be barreling on through. That's a pretty strong cold front. And you see this really strong high pressure that's driving it down. So this front's going to drive through here really on Tuesday and Tuesday night. And by the time we get into Wednesday, what's going on here is you've got, still probably, we may not be a major hurricane come Wednesday, Humberto, but it's still going to be a strong hurricane. It's still going to be probably a Cat 2. And then you also got low pressure system down here, which is going to be maybe Hurricane Imelda. So now you got these two, but then you have the strong high pressure to the north, and we're just getting squeezed in. There's a squeeze play. Pretty typical for us, and we get stuck in between all three of these weather systems. And so you look at these pressure gradient here across the mid-Atlantic, and it's just a strong northeast wind coming from way out in the Atlantic. And that sets up Wednesday, and notice how it just stays there on Thursday and really into Thursday night. And we really don't see this pressure gradient starting to relax until later on Friday and maybe into next weekend. So what that's going to mean is a pretty good duration of some decent northeast winds, probably gusting up to maybe 40 miles an hour. We'll talk about that. And with that's going to come some tidal flooding and high seas and all kinds of good stuff. So very kind of interesting pattern. Good confidence in this, though. So I think we've got the forecast pretty well dialed in at this point. So here's the good news. The fact that the system is staying farther to the south, that edge of the heavy rain that's going to be north of what's now Tropical Depression 9, that's with the system further south, the heavier rain stays further south. So we're really not in an outlook for heavy rainfall, just a marginal here over northeast North Carolina for Monday and Tuesday. But you don't see that slight risk up in our area of a higher risk of potential of flooding. So that's good news. This is our rainfall forecast. And that's a misprint there because that says through Sunday night. So we should have caught that one. This actually takes us through Wednesday morning. So sorry about that. So this is the rainfall forecast. It really captures, most of the storm, really all the storm. And so on average, maybe a half inch to an inch of rain is more expected, early this week, but really not much at all. And you see here some probabilities. We throw these in here every now and then. So this is kind of the probabilities there, I'd say, for Southern Virginia, Northeast North Carolina. So good confidence we're going to get an inch of rain with this system as it gets closer. You kind of see there Monday into early Tuesday is kind of when we expect maybe some rain. Maybe even, I'd say 35% of the models are saying maybe 2 inches. So 2 inches, I think, is definitely possible in some areas, especially the areas you see here kind of in the darker greens. But when you start talking about 3 inches, that probability has dropped quite a bit to less than 20%, almost about 15 to 16%, and 4 inches of rain, almost non-existent at only 5%. So that's really good news as far as that is concerned. And this is again showing you the rainfall, basically, more focused in on late Monday and Tuesday. As the map catch up there. So that's when we expect most of the rain, and that's what you're seeing here on the left-hand image here. Is that's the rainfall. You kind of notice those higher amounts are way to the south, so really cutting off, right around Morehead City, back to parts of Fayetteville. That's kind of maybe the northern edge of where some of that heavier rainfall that could set up from the system as it, basically, stalls off of Florida, makes that right-hand turn and goes out to sea. So that's good news. If the system had come further north, these higher rainfall totals would be coming all the way up into Southeast Virginia and Southern Virginia, but that's not happening. So that's really good news. And these probabilities have decreased too. This is just the probability of getting 2 inches of rain, so not even 3 inches of rain. So again, not a really high probability of 2 inches of rain across the area. I'll show it another way. A lot of ways we can slice probabilities, and it can get confusing. But this is a chance of an inch of rain across the area. So anything over 50% chance is probably going to happen. So you kind of see some good confidence here that we might be able to get an inch of rain out of this. But when you get to 2 inches of rain, the should come up here hopefully, unless the site has gone down. I have to log back in, so I apologize for that. Yeah, it kicked me out. All right, well, we'll forego that because it's kicked me out because I stayed in there too long. So I apologize for that, but you get the gist of it. Maybe we sneak out 2 inches of rain at the worst, but that's not going to be a big issue. So again, I'm not going to go over the temperatures, here too much. Just notice the best chance of rain really is kind of late Monday, especially more like on Tuesday. And even that's just chances. It's not like we have 80, 90% chances of rain. You're just talking about scattered showers, maybe 40 to 50% chance, with maybe folks getting a half inch to an inch. Worst case, probably 2 inches of rain. So not a significant situation. We do have kind of a low threat rip currents right now. I'm not going to get into that. Only thing I'll mention is that the surf is really going to start kicking up after Monday, and we will be into pretty dangerous surf conditions, especially once we get past Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I got to be honest with you, the dangerous surf conditions are going to extend all the way into next weekend. We're going to have this northeast flow that's really not going to stop, and we're going to continue to see at least 5 to 6 foot waves coming into the beaches, even into a week from today, even into Sunday of next week. So we got a long time there with some kicked up surf conditions once they pick up. So we'll talk a little bit here about the tidal flooding. This is probably going to be one of the things we're going to notice a bit more in addition to the breezy conditions. And with that, I'll tell you what, let me show you the probability of the winds so you kind of get a sense here. So this is the probability of where we might see the 40 mile per hour wind gust. And so, again, it's It's not as strong as we were briefing earlier. One time we were talking about wind gusts of up to 45 miles per hour or even 50, but that's not going to happen, doesn't look like. I'd say, but wind gusts in the 40s or low 40s, it could happen. And so this is where you might see the wind gusts, getting around 40. And so you can kind of see the lower bay's got some probability here all along the coast, some good probability that you're going to see those wind gusts of around 40. And if we'll time it out here, that's Wednesday morning at 2 a.m. So by the time you get into about Wednesday morning at 8 a.m., that's when you see those winds. The probability of that 40-mile-an-hour wind gust really starting to increase for folks, maybe Ocean View over towards Virginia Beach, kind of getting into those better winds, the lower bay getting into those winds, as well as, Eastern Shore, far eastern North Carolina over Currituck. So that's Wednesday morning at 8. We kind of go through all day Wednesday. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I moved the wrong thing. Here we go. Kind of moving on in here. With probabilities increase on Wednesday afternoon. Here we are Wednesday evening. So pretty breezy all day Wednesday. Getting into early Thursday morning 8 a.m. We've still got some decent probabilities here. They are starting to decrease a little bit, and then as we trend forward, late Thursday and especially on Friday, those probabilities do decrease. Well, we'll see how fast those winds decrease. That might be a little fast. But because these winds are going to be northeast, they're going to be blowing pretty good. Some big seas are going to be coming in here. That's what's going to drive the tidal flooding. Now, we're probably in pretty good shape, really honestly, until about, I'd say, really about Wednesday, Thursday. And I think for the most part, we're going to see a lot of widespread minor tidal flooding, but I think we are going to see pockets of moderate. Potentially the James River, especially over here towards Lynn Haven, Little Creek, with that northeast wind, we might be able to get into some moderate tidal flooding. Further up the bay, Windmill Point, these areas here, we may have to watch out because later tides, because this only goes through Thursday, 8 a.m. So I think the Thursday tides could be a little bit higher than this. So I think you're going to start to see more moderate tidal flooding potentially, over places like Gloucester, Windmill Point, kind of in this area here. Maybe even Louisetta starts to get into minor a little bit later on. We'll have blowout tides, over parts of the Albemarle Sound, so that's not going to be a concern. But Corolla, our friends down there, again, some minor tidal flooding, but the problem is going to be 10 to 15-foot waves. So that's what's going to tear up the beaches and might limit access, as people try to drive back and forth up and down the beach down there in Corova. That could become a big problem as we push in through our early part of this week. So I'll just throw some tide models over here so you just get a sense of what's going on. This is there at Duck. And so you kind of see the tides here, not too bad. They start to jump up here a little bit once you get into, late Tuesday night into Wednesday. And then they jump up a little bit more as we get into Wednesday and Thursday. This is not extreme by any means. This is barely even a minor flooding there at Duck. The problem is going to be the wave action and the fact that the tides are going to stay elevated for several days. And I think the wave action is going to be the problem along the coast with those waves running up the beaches and the high tide and starting to cause you just some problems there. And then just stay elevated for quite some time. So that's there at Duck. We'll quickly show over here at Sewell's Point, since that's a reference point for a lot of folks. And you see the tides are pretty well behaved. Even here on Wednesday, this isn't too bad. This is just elevated. That's not really 4.5 feet flood stage. So you're barely touching maybe minor tidal flooding. This would be Tuesday afternoon. This would be the Tuesday evening tide, early Wednesday morning. The later tides do start to the high end does start to maybe flirt with 5.5 feet there at Sewell's if you're at worst case. And that puts us into about that moderate tidal flooding. So we'll see. I think worst case, Sewell's Point might make a run at 5.5, but mostly probably right around 4.5 to 5 feet is probably where Sewell Point's going to be. So that's good, solid minor tidal flooding, nothing too extreme. The model doesn't go out any further than this, but you can kind of get a sense that these tides, once they get up there, they're going to persist through Thursday. And in fact, the tides might bump up a little bit on Thursday, maybe not a lot, but maybe just a teeny bit on Thursday. So you're probably going to have about, I'd say, maybe 2 or 3 tide cycles that you're going to have flooding here. So it's going to last for a little bit, just about anywhere. We'll move up a little bit further towards Windmill Point, going up the bay a little bit. So you can kind of see here a little bit more of a spike, a little bit faster of a jump as the water gets bottled up in the bay and those tides build. So we'll have to watch out for that. This will start to push maybe into some of that, I'd say, high-end minor to moderate tidal flooding. So this is kind of more the middle bay, I'd say Gloucester North. We'll have to watch out for this because you definitely see that departure kind of increasing a little bit there, more so than, let's say, Sewell's Point. And that's because the bay is getting bottled up and the water from the northern bay can't get out. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Again, more moderate tidal flooding. I'll move up the James River. I know we've got some of our DOT friends on here, so I'll kind of show here at the ferry. Again, you see another pretty good jump here in the tide. So, not too bad for a while, but then you get this jump here, and this is that Wednesday evening tide, and then we'll see what happens there as we get through Thursday. We just don't go out far enough, but this gets us to that, moderate tidal flooding there. I'd say Smithfield, on up to the ferry. So could be a little bit of an issue there, right around 4.5 feet. We'll have to watch that. I think that's moderate tidal flooding up there. So we'll kind of keep a close eye on that. But even up in the James, we see a pretty good jump in the tides with the system. And again, it's just because of the northeast wind and the fact that we get those waves, pretty good sized waves moving into the mouth of the bay, and it causes the water to just kind of pile up and just kind of get stuck in here. So Wednesday, Thursday, those are the days we're really going to be watching out for some recurrent tidal flooding. We're not seeing anything more than moderate. I mean, we're not seeing anything right now that would make us think we're getting into major tidal flooding. So that's good news. I think it's mostly going to be minor to moderate, but for several tide cycles. So just something to be aware of. Whoop, sorry about that. So shifting gears real quickly into the marine forecast, we briefed some of our marine partners already. The bottom line is we're going to be getting into a pretty decent period of gale conditions with sustained winds around 30 knots, gusting close to 40. And so you see that starts to kick in later on Tuesday, the area here in red representing kind of the gales. And then it expands as we go through the day Wednesday. The gales just kind of extend everywhere from the James River on up through the bay and offshore. And then even into, I'd say Thursday night, we still have really high probability of gale conditions just continuing to persist. And it doesn't really start to come down again until almost about Friday and it's still breezy. It's just not gusting to, 40 knots anymore. It's starting to come down to more small craft advisory conditions, maybe gusting to around, let's say, 25 to 30 knots. And that'll continue into next weekend. So again, this is just a heads up that we will probably have gale watches go into effect. And this is just kind of timing of the gales starting late Tuesday. And I'd say lasting all the way through Thursday. The graphic only went through Wednesday night here, but honestly, we'll have gales all the way through Thursday, most likely, as far as the duration of it. Just a good long northeast blow, typical weather that we expect from that. And there you see your peak wind. So this is in knots, but it gives you guys along the coast an idea of the timing of the winds there. So once you get past, I'd say about noon or so on Tuesday, those northeast winds start to increase here. You got Cape Henry, you got the JRB. So you get an idea here when those winds are picking up. They're going to be blowing all day Wednesday pretty good. So these are in knots. So these actual wind speeds in miles per hour is actually getting into the 40s. So pretty good northeast wind gusting into the 40s here Wednesday, even into Thursday. And then the wind starts to slowly decrease. And here's kind of a longer range looking at sustained wind versus the wind gust. And again, this is in knots. So for miles an hour, you got to bump it up, but it gives you a good idea of the timing. But by the time we get into Friday, the winds are starting to decrease here. Still breezy. I'm not saying it's going to be calm, but the winds at least decrease here on Friday and Saturday, but still just notice that wind direction. It never changes. It just stays northeast. And honestly, it's going to be northeast really, all next week into next weekend. That never really stops, unfortunately. Wave height wise, and this is actually what's going to help drive some of the tides. The graphics go through about Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. So the seas along the coast are going to build up to anywhere from 7 to 10 feet. They're going to get pretty good size, and we'll see max waves of almost about 12 to 15 feet as you get near the coast. So that wave energy coming in combined with the wind, all that waves and wind and wave coming in the bay, that's really what's going to get our tidal flooding going up to that potentially moderate levels. This is actually showing you those wave heights there. So you really see those waves starting to build Tuesday, but then by late Wednesday, Thursday, those waves are really up there. So that's why, combination of the wind and the waves, that's why we're okay with the tides really until we get later in Wednesday. It's got to build up. And then I'd say Wednesday night, Thursday, we're going to have to watch out for those tides. I'm not going to get into all this. This is more for the marine folks, but the only thing I'll mention here is that you see these arrows going different directions here once you push into Tuesday and Wednesday. And so the bottom line is we're going to have waves out there at the Capes, about 8 feet or so, 8 to 10 feet. But they're going to be conflicting to each other. So you're going to have a southeast swell at about 6 to 8 feet, and you're going to have a northeast wind wave at about 6 to 8 feet. So what that means is, bottom line, the ocean is going to be very chaotic and with those conflicting wave energies out there. You'll probably even see it at the coast with some pretty rough surf conditions with swell coming in from the southeast, but then also this really strong wind wave coming in from the northeast as those northeast winds increase Tuesday and Wednesday. So going to be kind of a real mess out there along the coast as we get into later this week. Let's see if I had anything else I wanted to show. Yeah, I do want to show. I will show the rainfall, how it's going to play out while we're kind of getting saved with the rain. I meant to show this with the precipitation. So this does a pretty good job. It's just a single run. It's the GFS. But what you'll see here is the system actually comes up here and makes that turn. And you'll see that heavy rain to the north. I just wanted to show that right in here, how that rain blossoms there over southeast North Carolina and parts of South Carolina. So the system's actually down here east of Florida. So that's that band of heavy rain that's going to set up north of the tropical system. And you really see here how it never really gets out of southeastern North Carolina. And right at the border is kind of on the edge of it. Maybe it bleeds in a little bit, some decent rain into south central Virginia, maybe a little bit far southeast Virginia. But that's not, again, we're only talking maybe an inch, 2 inches at the most. So you really see that slug of heavy rain stays just to our south. So we're really fortunate with that, because remember, we were saying that if this system had come up off of Georgetown or Myrtle Beach, this slug of heavy rain you're seeing here would have been displaced up over parts of over central and southeast Virginia and northeast North Carolina. So it's still there. I just wanted folks to see that slug of heavy rain is still there. It's just well to our south now that the system stays to our south. So that's really good news. And with that, I'll go ahead and stop the recording and see if there's any questions.